Welcome back to another episode of Positively Uncensored, your favorite reality TV and interview podcast. It's your host, Leah, and today we are going to be diving into the rest of the episodes in the pods, episodes 2 through 6. I have some good and some bad news for you. The bad news, because we'll start with that first, is that the bulk of these episodes, in fact, 5 of them, we were stuck in the pods. The good news is episode 6 has a lot of different things for us to discuss, and I'm going to help keep things short, keep things sweet. And if you're not even watching the season of Love is Blind and you're sparing yourself, quite frankly, but you would just like to get a summary, I'm your girl. I will help you get through things. Now, warning, warning, to address a comment I got on Spotify on my last episode, I'm probably going to mess up people's names. When we have Mike, Nick and Brendan and other guys who look exactly the same and have, like a very white guy name, I'm sorry, but I'm going to mix them up. It just kind of is what it is. Add on the fact that I don't care about Annie, I don't care about Nick, and because I don't like Annie and her politics, I, by way, don't care about what she had going on with Brendan. So most of the people's names who I mess up, I don't care about. Now, where I left off in episode 2 of Love is Blind was the conversation where Kacie and Patrick were talking and she forced him to share his ethnicity. I talked before about how uncomfortable this was, but by the time I got to episode 6, I was reaffirmed that every single thought that I had about Kacie Cavalieri El Musa was correct. And I'm going to keep calling her that because if you missed my last recap, I said that Kacie reminded me of a mix between Kristen Cavalieri, Tarek El Musa's current wife, Heather, and his ex-wife, all three of them put together, and I'm going to stand on that. So the difference at this time, episode 2, Anna is still there, right? And I believe her name is Anna. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Patrick has a conversation with her, and this is, I believe, after he's had a conversation with Kacie. And the differences in the way that the conversations went said a lot. Both of them said that they don't typically date Asian people. Like she said, she typically dates white guys. Patrick said that he also typically dates white women because they are in Denver, Colorado. However, the two of them gave each other compliment to the fact that they were excited about each other. It was just a much different reaction, like that's so hot, than what was happening between Kacie and Patrick. Although we'll get to, there are some layers to what's going on here that as somebody who's not Asian, I don't want to be inappropriate and place my lens over, but I would suspect that and I'll tune into other Asian creators. Please tag them if you know of somebody who's covering Love is Blind so I can get a range of opinions. Or if you're Asian yourself and you'd like to share your perspective. I don't want to speak for them, but I feel like there's a certain bit of internalized hatred, specifically with Patrick himself. And we hear about some of the comments that he's heard his entire life about people saying that he's attractive for an Asian guy, or just saying, why would you date Patrick? He's Asian. So I know that all of this is the fault of white supremacy. Like all of this is not just a conscious choice to have internalized self-hatred or internalized insecurities, whatever Patrick may be feeling. And it is a result of living in a society that reinforces so much white supremacy. But I will just say it's sad to watch. I'm not going to speak for whether or not that was showing up on Anna's side because we saw her for so briefly. Please feel free to share your perspective in my comments. But for Patrick especially, we can tell that not only this is an insecurity he has because of what non-Asian people in Denver have said to him personally, and just his own, indicative of just his own feelings about himself. Moving into episode 3, though, Patrick shows up for a date with Anna. And at the end of their last date, I believe he said something like to the effect of, I think that you could be my person. And it was clear that things were seemingly going very well between the two of them. Now, with everything that we just talked about, whether the two of them internally were having doubts about dating somebody who's Asian because of the things that we just talked about and their preferences and what may cause those preferences, I'm not sure. But Anna disappears. And what we do know is that she was connecting with both Blake, the guy who took her on a camping date, as well as Patrick. So Patrick is ghosted. And again, this season of Love is Blind, especially, I just don't feel like on prior seasons we've seen as much of the ghosting. Typically, the story is just left out altogether, but I feel like every person is getting ghosted. So after Patrick is ghosted by Anna, we see this very big shift between how Patrick is now sure that Kacie is his number one. Now, Blake ultimately ends up going home. I think this is because he was most excited about his connection with Anna. I'm not even remembering, quite frankly, who Blake's other connection with. I feel like it was Sparkle Megan. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I don't, if it was Sparkle Megan, especially then, I don't think that he was excited about exploring that connection. Also, the length of time that we spend on Megan W., aka Sparkle Megan, and her connection between what is his name, Mike and Jordan, and trying to decide between the two of them. I could care less. It's just way too much time. So even imagining having that be a love square instead of a love triangle is absolutely no, no. Now, I don't feel that badly for Brendan when it comes to the fact that Annie doesn't ultimately pick him. Spoiler, I'm going a little bit ahead and out of order. But we hear a conversation, episode 3, where Brendan is in the lounge with the guys and he sort of and I think it's Brendan. It honestly could have been Mike now that I know that I mixed the two of them up so much. Whether it's Brendan or whether it's Mike, one of them is talking about how his old ex of 6 months still comes over, even though she has a boyfriend. And it sounds like they get in the sauna together. I think it was Mike, actually. And it seems like they still hook up. Brendan, whatever. However, Annie in a conversation that we see later on makes me think, okay, well, if you're even interested in Annie, something like this probably came up with you as well, and you probably feel the same way as her. Now, Mike and Megan W. go on a very odd date where they talk about being healthy, being nutritious, working on that body, and how that's such a turn on for him. And Mike is just very clearly fat phobic. Mike is clearly fat phobic. Mike clearly has very weird superstitions about health. He also is clearly very misinformed. He has a lot of conspiracies. And quite frankly, Mike to me gives somebody who's on the carnivore diet and is red pilled. That's the vibe that I get from Mike. Now, in this conversation that I said was odd, it started off about them talking about how it turns him on to think about being a healthy and nutritious couple. He talks about Jordan having a diabetic child and how he just can't even imagine that experience. And he wants to make sure that him and Megan have the healthiest kids ever and that she's cooking healthy meals for the two of them, all but implying that you can control whether your child gets diabetes solely based on diet. Like it's preventative and it's attributed just purely because of diet. And that's just not true. That's not true. He needs to inform himself. It's gross that he said that. It's gross that he said that in general because it's not true. It's probably very triggering for people who either are diabetic themselves or have children who are diabetic. That misconception that parents are bad parents and give their children diabetes is insulting, okay? Um, Second up, to be discussing somebody's child in a negative way, or talking about like their illness as a topic of conversation or something to say like I don't want our kids to be that way is just so grossly inappropriate. Whether he knew Jordan was in conversation with Megan or not, I've seen some people speculate on the fact that Mike knew that Megan's connection was with Jordan, and he said that to try to make her have a specific type of image of Jordan, because I also heard people say that they felt like after this conversation, Megan W. in her mind was picturing that Jordan was overweight. So I don't know. There's lots of layers to this conversation, but at the very baseline, it was awkward and weird. And anybody who says that I want to have the most nutritious, healthiest, best fed kids, sexiest kids, that's a direct quote from Mike, and Megan's just nodding along and agreeing. The two of you deserve each other. You're both very weird, you're both judgmental, and your priorities are skewed. Both of them also come across as social climbers and liars. They look like they live outside of their means, and like I don't believe that Megan's rich, and I don't believe that Mike's rich. I guess I'll have to see an attached pay stub to really believe, or a glimpse of their checking account. But I'm not buying it. Okay. Now, after this, what I thought was a very weird date with Mike, Megan had a good taste in her mouth, because her plan was to have a conversation with Jordan and friend zone him and just focus on one connection, but they end up having a really great chat. I think she talks more about her dad, and she's not able to do that. On her next date, she gets stood up and she can't believe it. This is why I think that Megan W was the one who was with Blake, because we know that he just left, right? She walks in and she's like, "Hello, hello, hello, hello." Hello. After the fourth hello, I would have walked out of there, maybe even less. If I walk in and it's crickets, I'm leaving. I found that embarrassing. However, cast her in a Verizon commercial. I don't know. I'm glad that she was left there. Now, Joe and Madison meet up in episode 3. And their meetup, I just found very awkward and disrespectful. I feel like Joe, and I'm going forward a little bit again, but I feel like Joe felt the exact same way as Kacie felt about Patrick, but rather than, at least Kacie, hate Kacie, right? I don't think she's a good person, but at least Kacie, although she tried to manipulate Patrick afterwards, at least she had the gall to like make a decision and state how she was truly feeling. Joe, the entire time that he's with Madison, humbles her and makes her feel more insecure, but also beats around the bush and gives her small bits of attention here and there. The two of them meet and he was speechless. Some of the things he says include, "I was not expecting that. You didn't look like the person that I was talking to." So he had a completely different picture of what Madison would look like in his mind. And that leads me to wonder, what I would like to hear more of the conversations that they had and why he has this impression. Now, he continues by saying, "This is a surprise. You aren't what I was expecting." The ego in me would think that this would be enough to have such a bitter taste in my mouth that even if I thought that he was an absolute 10, you're not going to make me feel self conscious like that. And I wouldn't have wanted to continue on that end. Okay. And then he follows it up with, "Now, when I think of Madison, Madison's attached to that," and points at her essentially. And he's like, "Well, not that, but you get her out, get her out." The disrespect is wild. Okay. So they kiss. He does repropose. It's very awkward. I feel bad for Madison because she's clearly like a very kind person. And as any woman, she just wants to be validated and told nice things. She also has her own confidence about herself that I hope that Joe does not shatter for her. But she's asking questions that if he was as interested in her as he was showing in the pods, I think he would be saying himself. I don't think that he would have to be prompted to express how he's feeling, but because they don't know each other, I don't blame her necessarily for not knowing how to read the situation. Now, like I said, I don't care about Annie and Nick's relationship, so I'm just going to be talking about it in bursts on the things that are important. They have a conversation where Nick talks about how he's a horn dog, and when he thinks of Annie, it makes him feel like an old 90s movie or an old 60s film where a girl just walks by and all the guys are like, oh, oh, and they're just hooting and yelling and tripping all over. And Annie, that's how you make me feel, Annie. It's a hard knock life for Annie, always stuck with Nick the Dick. Instead of doing things with Brendan, you are stuck with Nick. He's spending money on his watches on the fly, off the top of the fly. Annie, it's a hard knock life. That's so embarrassing. Just yelling and tripping and hooting and hollering around. Ooh. I got such a cringe from Nick. Nick makes me feel very conflicted as an individual. I'm going to say this. Please don't speculate on Nick's sexuality in my comments. I know that a lot of people feel like in certain cases it's okay, and I even find myself conflicted, but it's not appropriate. It's not appropriate to speculate on his sexuality. What I will say about Nick is I think that he's a very taking him as he is. I think he's a very interesting person, and I think that at the very least he's had people question his masculinity. His mother even says this, and I think that he really tries to play into this masculine bro smacking ass loving titties type thing, and that's just not him. That's not to say that he's not straight. I'm taking him as he says he is. And that's just, I mean, like, that's just not his vibe. You can still be straight and not be super misogynistic or like I don't know what to say about Nick, but he's overcompensating, whether it's for how he feels about himself, how others have made comments about him. I don't know what he's overcompensating for, but the way that he talks is just not natural. The things that he says just aren't convincing. And that's what I will leave it at. Again, I'm not speculating. I don't think it's appropriate that we speculate, but he's certainly overcompensating, and that's what I'll look like. Now, Annie's hair looks like Cousin It, and I found that something relevant to throw in as well. I'm I think she said she's a hairdresser. Did you not bring your products? Is this the marketing for the salon? I'm certainly not interested. Okay. Now they had a conversation where he said that he's yelling and hooting and hollering over Annie and that he's a horn dog for her, to right after have a conversation with Kate where he calls her his baby Kate and tells her, hey, if you're feeling sick, baby Kate, you can go home and take a nap. I won't be mad at all. And she's like, you know what? I knew that. Like, I knew that you would be able to go home. I think I like Kate a lot. Kate, you dodged a fucking bullet. You dodged a bullet by not being with Nick. I hope that your politics absolutely don't align with his because you question religion and don't consider yourself a religious person. I believe that they would conflict massively. And I'm wondering if they ever even got there, right? But Kate tells Nick that he has given her nothing to question at this point in their relationship, and she's falling for him too. He's in sandals, prescribing his love for her, and I'm just giving the ick even more. He's like, I'm gonna fight for you, Kate. I'm gonna fight for you, Kate. Like, fight who? Like, at this point, I'm sure Kate's connecting with multiple people, but we're only seeing conversations between you. And you're also saying very similar things to Annie. He tells her, good night, girlfriend. He is a wannabe player. He's a wannabe player. Okay. Now, Patrick learns that Blake went home, and he is now processing the fact that Anna also went home. And I wonder if at any point anybody thought 1 + 1 = 2. Did the two of them go home so that they can date outside of things? I can't wait to get an update on the two of them personally. I don't know. But Patrick is now veering into his connection very heavily with KKKacie. And he says that she's very open to other ethnicities. Her dad karaoke's in Korea. Her brothers are in interracial relationships. And he just feels very comfortable. Again, I want to toe the line of never saying things that are inappropriate or judgmental, as I don't have the experience of being Asian. But it's very clear to me that Patrick, like, is he's almost fetishizing being with Casey because she's a white woman. And that's probably because of the proximity to whiteness that he would gain and feeling as if he has more access to powers and privilege because of the relationship with Casey, as well as having a quote unquote trophy wife, living the American dream, getting a girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, right? Or at least, but a piece of Patrick is overlooking the fact that something was off with Casey and something is off about her family. Okay. As I stated on my TikTok, it sounds so grotesque to say, potentially even inappropriate, but the way that Casey talks about her family sounds scary. It sounds like a Get Out. It sounds like they think of people and partners as if they are collecting Pokemon. It feels like they feel like, okay, well, now we have someone who's Latina in our family. Now we have someone who's Asian in our family. Now we have someone who's half Black in our family. Casey, your turn. Even when she talked about how one of her brothers only dates Asian women, for what reason? Because is that rooted in any type of fetish? It's like some white men have this misconception that by dating an Asian woman they will be with a woman who is more passive or that they can control more. So for what reason are you saying that? And then now Patrick starts saying how Anna was too similar to him. One of the guys says to him something along the lines of, yeah, I mean, you don't want to fuck your twin. And just given the layers of this conversation, it just felt gross. Like all of it just felt gross. So Patrick has a date with Casey, and it starts off innocent enough. She's teaching him about why there are three beans in an espresso, to all of a sudden Patrick is talking about how when they meet the two of each other, that she's going to look at him and say, damn, that's a hot ass guy. You're a hot guy. And that's what I mean about Patrick as well. He should be confident, but it's like this faux confidence. And the two of them are very heavily leaning into each other's look. This whole conversation is weird because she ends up saying, "Oh my God, like I'm gonna be with the hottest guy the hottest guy in high school." Mind you, why are you going all the way back to high school? And she was like, and he's like, "Hottest guy in high school? I don't know about all that, but." And then he tells her about the comments that he's heard his whole life. So the conversation shifts a little. And he talks about how he's heard the comments that he's hot for an Asian his whole life. And as I've said, it just didn't land to me like Casey believed him. And she certainly hasn't had an experience like that herself. Patrick continues because we're still talking about hotness, about how his cousin always tells him, "You're the hot girl who doesn't know that she's hot." The hotness, the hotness. Now, is Patrick trying to do this for Casey, who clearly looks mad or two, or does he feel this way? It's very hard to know. Okay. Casey ends up telling Patrick that she wants more validation from him and that she's worried about his other connections. He lies again and says that he had to cut off one of his connections, to which she takes as thinking that he cut off the connection for her, showing that he's more serious about their relationship, when the reality is she left. You know, like there was no decision that he made on that. Now, Patrick's number one concern, and he's voicing this to Casey, is that he just doesn't know how bad Casey wants this, which I believe then turns into a conversation where Casey talks dirty to him. And it's It's one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever seen. I truly could barely watch it. It wasn't even a situation like a train wreck where you can't help but keep listening and keep watching. Like I truly felt shudders all over my body listening to them talk. Their conversations are just very unnatural. Okay. Now, continuing along, I stated that I don't really care about what's the context of Jordan and Megan W's date, but to keep continuity, he comes back from a date with Megan where he was absolutely glowing about his date, and Mike was sitting there going like this to Patrick, telling him, "We're dating the same girl." Like me, Jordan, we're dating the same girl. And at that point, that's why I even more felt like the conversations he made about Jordan's son were intentional, because I believe that you did that for a reason. Episode 3 ends with Edmund meeting Calabria to Katy Perry's Dark Horse. So you want to play with magic. The next episode, episode 4, starts with Edmund telling Calabria that he meant all of the things that he said in the pods. He also had a little piece of tape on his chest that had KB written on that. We learn later on, I'm not sure if she actually loved that gesture. KB does, however, love her ring, and Edmund ends up crying and says in a confessional that he's about to be crying with a boner to his new wife. Calabria says in her confessional that in real life that she would have walked past Edmund, but after what they've built in the connection that she's excited. Oh, KB, oh, KB, you have a lot of things coming for you in this episode. Now, we continue on to what turns into a very heated conversation between Kate and Nick. As you remember, Nick is in a love triangle with Kate and Annie, two blondes. Now, they talk, and she talks about how she is not religious, but she is spiritual. And after her mom died of colon cancer, she just really can't understand how God would ever let someone go through what her mom would have went through. Actually, excuse me, this is not the conversation that turns heated, but Nick has a reaction that would make you feel like this conversation never took place in an upcoming episode, which we will get to in a minute. But he ends this conversation out by saying that his nickname from other people is Watchman, which I just find ridiculous, and I find all of Nick ridiculous. I appreciate Kate talking about that experience and her journey with how she's feeling about her faith, because I think that that's an experience that a lot of people relate to. Nick and Annie, after having a conversation about how Kate is not overly spiritual, this must have been weighing on Nick because somehow in his next date, which happens to be with Annie, they end up talking about LGBTQIA plus and what the reaction would be if their child ever came to them and said, "I'm LGBTQ." Now, Annie says that she wouldn't be the most excited about that. And Nick asks her, "So do you think it's a fad?" To which she says, 100%, I do. And the both of them agree emphatically to this and thinking that it's a fad and that they would just have to question whether or not somebody was influencing their child or whether or not one of their friends told them, "You're gay, so now you're questioning if you're gay." And what an interesting perspective to have when your mom lovingly asked you if you were gay, Nick, and was held space to be accepting of you if you were, and you were able to answer that and say no. Like in theory, you are proof in the pudding that just by somebody asking you when you're an adolescent what your sexuality is, or potentially even assuming what your sexuality is, that just doesn't make you gay. right? Like you yourself have said that you are the living testimony to that. So I don't understand how that's now reversed and you ended up getting red pilled and swallowing the propaganda, and you now believe that if somebody ever has that conversation with your child or talks about their sexuality, like that's going to convince them. The same way that you and Annie, in theory, kissing each other and having a quote unquote loving, healthy marriage, a healthy example for your children, can't convince them to be straight. This conversation was so frustrating. And I saw a comment on my TikTok that says that they think that the editors put this conversation in to really show how big of pieces of shit Nick and Annie are. And I don't think that we should give that much credit. I have a hard time believing that that was the intention of this conversation. And especially because they've been, and I've talked about this over a year ago, how they've been forcing conservatism more and more down our throats, especially as they are able to more with where we are as a society and feeling so emboldened to with the shift in media. I don't think that that was the intention of the conversation. And if that was the intention, the impact of the conversation is they both said something harmful out there that's now going to be out there forever. And if you ever change your minds, I don't know, your kids are going to watch that someday and probably still have questions. Also, it's just offensive and upsetting to hear people talk like that in 2025, not while unsurprising, upsetting. And between that and Casey's racism towards Patrick, it's just a lot, right? Casey ends up talking to Calabria back in the lounge and telling her about her ex-boyfriend. So this is how the topic of Casey's ex-boyfriend comes up. And apparently he told her that he could have convinced her just a few months before the decision to do Love is Blind not to go. And they both comment on just the ego that he had and how obsessed he was with her, specifically for her looks. It's interesting though, because we later hear Casey say out of her own mouth that she is also obsessed with looks and typically puts a lot of stock into things looks wise as to how she proceeds with relationships. So your ex was into you for your appearance and vice versa. And Casey, you don't look that good. Like you may have protected yourself from sun damage by getting a fake tan, but you walk around looking like your president, looking like a Cheeto. You look a mess, right? Fast forward though, we are in a date with Patrick and Casey. Take a shot every time I say fast forward. I need to think of another transition to moving ahead now, a couple minutes later. Further in the episode, Patrick and Casey are on their date, and he tells her that he applied himself to be on the show. And she says that she was able to go on a reality dating show a while ago if she wanted to, because her ex that she had given her permission. So we, number one, know that she's been offered to go on multiple dating shows. We know that she was in a relationship that would allow that. And she says that the reason being because that's what he cared about. Like he thought that I would come on and be the hottest girl there and he would have bragging rights. And then I would come back to him and get the opportunity. And of course, Patrick is naturally wondering if he said the same thing about her experience on Love is Blind right now. And we know that he did because she just said so to KB. But this is important, right? Because this would place a huge doubt and red flag in anybody's mind that Casey's not just here doing the exact same thing. And Patrick does comment on the fact that he ended things before he got there. Any loose strings, any one night stands, any relationships, he cleared things up. There's nothing to say. There's no communications that need to happen. All of that was cut off before he got to the pods so that he could intentionally look for his partner. Casey, on the other hand, her plan was to not tell her ex, that she has gotten engaged. And the issue with that is her ex had the impression that she would go on the show it wouldn't work out, that it was stupid, and that Casey would come crawling back to him. So if she was truly going to stay with Patrick, a boundary would have to have been set in place with said ex to say, I got engaged, joke's on you, the show did work for me, and don't talk to me. My new husband is amazing. But the fact that Casey didn't want to do that, that says a lot. That says a lot. And this is actually the conversation that turns to the horrifying dirty talk. Here, yep, wrong again. Fine, bill me. Casey, the fact that she is a manipulative wench. The fact that she goes from disclosing that, like, yeah, I had a boyfriend, like he's basically waiting for me on the outside if things end, and then Patrick is suddenly feeling a little skeeved out by things. So her solution is to just throw herself at him verbally and be like, I was just gonna go crazy on you and lick you from head to toe, and you just don't even know what I'm about to do to you. I can't even. Like, I'm going to sit on you. I don't even know how long I'll be able to do that. Disgusting. Disgusting, right? You did that as a distraction, and that should be a flagrant foul. Producers should come out and blow a whistle. I fast forwarded through the next scene because Megan W., Jordan, and Mike were all three on my scenes, and I don't care about any one of their dates. What I do care about is Nick and Kate have a conversation where he says that he currently feels jumbled in two separate directions, that he loves Kate. And I don't know if he says that he loves somebody else, but he's feeling pulled towards somebody else. And this is news to Kate, because how can you just say that you love me and you've fallen in love with me, but you're very torn between another person? Like, you can't love me and then also feel conflicted to picking someone else if you love me. And he basically flips his top over this and says, Kate, like, you can't judge how I was feeling in that moment. Like, that's very dismissive of you to say that. And she's like, love is not a moment. Love is not a moment. It's not fleeting. It's forever. So you saying you feel that way about me just comes across like love bombing. That's what it comes across like. Now, Nick ends up tanking the rest of this conversation because we're not just going to talk about my faults. That's how he felt. He ends up saying that this isn't their biggest hurdle, right? Their biggest hurdle is actually if Kate is open to exploring her relationship with God, because that's something that's very important to him, to which she says, no. I mean, I told you how I feel about my faith, about why I feel about this way, and I was very honest about that. Kate, you never told me that you weren't a Christian. Kate, are you kidding me, Kate? Get a shot in here, get a tranquilizer in here. What is he on about? What is he on about? Chelsea, I'm blaming you, Chelsea. I don't believe that 90% of who we are seeing are not sound cast members. You can't convince me that Nick was sound during all of the psychological evaluations. There's many other people to add to the list, but we'll start with Nick. Moving forward, because apparently I started taking notes on Love After Lockup, naturally, let's go to the rest of the episode. Nick ultimately ends up ending things with Kate. And he tells her it's not just hard for her, it's hard for him as well. And this isn't easy. Cry me a fucking river. Not you wanting sympathy after deceiving her, leading her on, lying to her. The solace is Kate, he's ugly. He's short, he misrepresents himself, he has a temper, and honestly, this is the best thing that has ever happened to you, Kate. Okay? After ending things with Kate and wanting empathy from her, because naturally Nick is always the victim, he goes into a conversation with Annie where he calls himself the wish Zach. You're not even that, bro. Like, you're not even that. There's nothing to say. Like, there's that comparison. No, not even. You are the wish Beavis and Butthead. You are the Wish Gibby from iCarly. Like, I don't know who you are. You're not that guy, bro. You're not that guy, pal. Okay? Nick also wants empathy from Annie, naturally, because he deserves it. It's been a hard day of being deceiving and breaking people's hearts, all while wearing thong sandals. It's okay, though. Nick tells Annie that Kate threw a lot, not, he didn't say her name, but Kate threw a lot of daggers at him. And she's like, oh my God, are you okay? He's fine, Annie. He's fine. Okay? Now Nick tells Annie that he loves her, and it's these guys having their alleged number ones and then immediately leaning so heavy into their number two. It's draining. Where did we get these people? Where did we get these people? Okay. Annie tells Nick, I don't want to hurt my other connection, because now that Nick has ended things, Annie's feeling the pressure. And what she basically does is pussyfoots around for a few episodes at a time and doesn't end things with Brendan. They end up envisioning what their house would look like together, the trim on the door, the color of the door, the shutters, as if anybody would care. And after all that, she still ends up picking Nick. Edmund tells a bold-faced lie, episode 6, when he tells her that she made the right decision by picking Nick. He's the big dog, and she would have missed out on what Nick has to offer, which is absolutely, pause for answer, nothing. Right? Moving forward, Kacie has a conversation with Patrick because they are not yet engaged, because we are still in the pods. 42 minutes into the recap, we're still in the pods. But Kacie tells Patrick that she woke up very sure of them. He proposes and ends with the classic, let's go to the proposal. They can't just leave things normal, though, because as I said, Patrick and Kacie are honestly both problematic. That's not to say that Patrick deserved any of the racism towards Kacie, but the things that he says are also problematic, because saying all our kids and all your brother's kids will be mixies and they'll be there for each other. I'll leave it there. And then to add in, if our kids aren't the most athletic, they'll be the smartest. Like, just reinforcing one racist stereotype after the next. Kacie chimes in and says, well, they'll get their smarts from you. It's so draining. It's so draining. Now, moving forward, because that's basically everything that we can stomach from Love is Blind episode 4, let's get into Today's episode of Positively Uncensored is brought to you by Audible. Audible gives you access to thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, and originals all in one place. I love it because as much as I make time to binge reality TV, I always wish I had more time for my ever-growing TBR list. But life and life's responsibilities always seem to get in the way of sinking into a good book. I'm sure that some of you, if not most of you, can relate. With Audible, I can finally catch up on the books that have been on my TBR list while I'm driving to work, cooking, or even in the shower. If you've been meaning to read more but can't find the time, listening with Audible makes it easy. You can try it out for free by heading to the details in the description. And when you do, you're also supporting the show. Now, let's get back to the episode 5. Nick and Annie get engaged, okay? He proposes. Nobody cares about that. She says yes. They get engaged. She seems happy. He seems happy. He woohoos down the hall after walking her back. And they arguably, unfortunately, have one of the most real link ups. Like, I don't know. They're both swooning over each other. Episode 5 is the episode that Annie finally puts us all out of our misery and makes her final decision, ends things with Brendan, and gets engaged to Nick. Now, Nick is woohooing down the hallway after they passionately make out, and honestly, and unfortunately, have one of the best meetups so far this season. Like, some of the meetings, it was a little hard to tell how people were feeling, but seemingly the two of them look happy. Nick's ecstatic when he walks back into the lounge, and Brendan is sitting at the table, which Nick claims that he doesn't know. I don't buy that for I don't buy that for a second. I think that Nick knew that Brendan would be sitting there, comes back, I'm engaged. He doesn't say it like that, but he's like, that's my voice. He's like, I'm engaged. Yay. Woo. And Edmund ends up crying, saying that he can't even look at Brendan, that Nick wouldn't even look at him when he said that. And at this point, I thought Edmund's like just very in tune with his emotions and feels things very deeply. I can't say that that's necessarily how I felt at the end of episode 6, but I'm finding commentary around Edmund a little bit difficult. So we'll get to that in a second. Now, Kacie and Patrick finally meet up because they got engaged. And right before they meet up, she says, I hope that he thinks I'm hot as fuck. Because remember, as she was claiming, she doesn't care about looks. She wants to be the funniest person in the room, not the hottest. Give me a break. Patrick's only anxiety is that things will go too perfectly. We hear Kacie say before they meet each other in her confessional, I know that he's Asian. I've never dated someone that looks like him. I've always been so looks based heavy. The scary part is knowing how I am, and I don't know how I'll be, but I'm so excited to touch him. Like, shut the fuck up, you racist bitch. No, you're not. You're not excited to touch him. You are saying you know exactly how you'll be because you're prejudiced. It's not you're you're not attracted. You're immediately not attracted to him simply because he's Asian and because he shared with you things that people said. You're trying to not be that person, but you know that you're that person. You know that you're that person. And I don't even know that you're trying. Okay? Now they meet up. The whole thing is awkward. Patrick is quick to get the ring out because there's really not very much conversation going. And they end up talking about how they're going to have the most beautiful baby that you've ever seen. He tells the cameras that she's fucking sick. You guys should meet her. Meanwhile, Kacie hightailed it out of there. And unlike a lot of the other couples where the guy would walk the girl all the way back to her side where she gets ready, or they would at least pause and take a longing last look at each other, she just goes right back. Walks right back, doesn't take a back look at Patrick, doesn't wait for him. She's over it. And she's immediately probably talking to a producer and telling them how she feels. Meanwhile, Patrick stops, pauses, does a look back, and Kacie's already gone. Okay. I did think it was interesting that Kacie has a dermal piercing in her chest. No judgment. I think that those can be beautiful. On her, I find it odd. I find it very odd. I can't exactly pinpoint her personality. In her confessional, not more than 10 minutes after her proposal, she claims that she can't remember their first kiss and she's feeling overwhelmed. And if it wasn't enough alarm bells upon their meeting, I already knew how things were going to pan out with Kacie. Moving forward, Annie and Nick, I already said that they met each other. The one funny thing to point out is right before meeting Nick, she said that she was expecting someone burly, strong, masculine. There's all of those things. And then there's Nick. But Dumb and Dumber are happy together, so let them be happy together. They're both harmful. Tuck them away from society. That's fine. Anytime a couple meets up and they kiss too much and there's very little talking, that's a bad sign for how things are going to go for them down the line. That's a new rule that I would like to implement for Love is Blind. Now, Megan W. and Jordan finally meet, and she's very complimentary of him, but him not so much. I feel like Jordan is very immature. I know that he has a son, but he to me just comes across just as odd as Megan. He has a full sleeves. My friend Tomaslian pointed out that he, for some reason, didn't like lied about his tattoos. I'm not sure the choice behind that. It ultimately ended up working out because Megan's like wet by this, but I thought that was weird. And he also says for her not to kiss him too much. Don't get too crazy. My mom's watching. How old are you? How old are we? Anyways, I think it just bothers me that I think that he looks like a cross between Zach and Inspector Gadget, or the guy who played Ferris Bueller, who potentially may be the same guy at different stages of his life in different movies. But Jordan, and Megan, I just think that they're the annoying couple. Next scene that we see is Kacie in the hotel lobby looking a fucking mess. She's got her hair extensions out, her hair is all ratty, up in her bun, her spray tan looks worse than it did before, and she's like, look at where we are now, in her confessional. I'm looking, and it's because of you. It's because of YOU. You. KKKacie. That's who it's because of. And she's like, he just deserves someone better than me. And okay. And she's like, he deserves somebody who's obsessed with him. And the producer was like, and that's not you. And she was like, no. So Patrick shows up and she starts with, I love you. I was so happy. And boom, we get into episode 6. Kacie tries to whisper and be slick, even though she's wearing a microphone and the cameras can still pick up on everything that you're saying. Nice try, Kacie. She's trying to whisper that she has to go home. Patrick outright asks her, are you trying to break up or are you trying not to go to Baja? To which she's like, no, I'm just, I'm trying to put things a different way. Like they're trying to spin it one way and like, I need to go home. Like, no. And she starts kissing every inch of his face. And she goes, they're trying to make it about what you look like. And it's like, no. And she's like, that's not it. It is it. It is it. He offers to slow their relationship down. She's like, I don't want to slow down that way. Again, I feel bad for Patrick the same way that I'm feeling bad for Madison, but it's like maybe when you're in the experience, it's just really hard to tell what's going on. But to me, it's very clear that she's breaking up. It's very clear. I don't want to slow down that way. And she's gaslighting you intentionally, right? It's mixed signals. She's kissing you, but listen to the words coming out of the mouth of the succubus and don't let her trick you. Like she is saying one thing. Now he says to her, let's just go home. And she's like, no, because the reality is she doesn't want Patrick to go with her. She's breaking up with him. Patrick ends up telling the camera crew, thank you for the experience. He's left with the impression that Kacie is just going home. He'll see her in Denver, that the whole problem is that she just doesn't want to be on camera anymore and she doesn't want to go to Baja. Even though she says to him when he says, I'll see you in Denver, but maybe you won't be there. Kacie, you are a bitch. You are a straight up bitch for how you do this to this man. You are a bitch. Now, like I said, Patrick is saying his goodbyes to production because unless they want to give him a free trip to Baja, he's just going to go see how things are with Kacie in the outside world. However, at the end of that confessional, he asks production if they heard anything differently. He said, Kacie still loves me. You know, she just doesn't want to go to Baja. So I think that things are good. What did you guys hear though? And then we see the video of what Kacie really says. And she says flat out, I don't think the extraction will grow. I know that it won't. She can't get there. And they tried to make it about his looks. You said it. You said it. You said it. And you said it even before you met. Moving to when the couples get to their honeymoon, because everybody is now engaged and things clearly didn't work out for Kacie and Patrick. At the very least, they're not going to Baja. Madison and Joe get to their hotel and she tries to have a conversation with a little bit of innuendo, like, look at our room. I wonder the things we could do in here. And Joe is just not interested. I hate how Joe interacts with Madison. There was one moment where Joe was nice, and then 30 seconds later, he allowed everything to happen that he said wouldn't. So no, I think he's an asshole. The one thing I'll say is that Edmund, because he's very emotional, like he does things that can be very sweet. For example, he brought KB a pair of shoes that were in her size. It looks like he got the two of them matching shirts. Those are gestures that I can appreciate. Allie ends up having a conversation with Anton right off the bat where she tells him that he's paying the bills. And I can tell that for them, and Megan W. and Jordan, finances are going to be a big issue in their relationships. Madison ends up telling Joe as they're sitting outside by the pool more about her eye condition and how she has motion sensitive lights at home to help her see, and about like what her specific limitations are as far as seeing in certain situations. He claims that he's going to be intentional about this and be her seeing eye person, to quote him, and to help her see. However, 10 seconds later, she trips over something, okay, that he didn't point out to her. And then 15 seconds after that, she gets in the pool and he doesn't tell her about how deep it is, to which she stumbles a little bit. She's okay. But Joe is just not a caretaker. When we know that there's a high percentage of men who leave their wives when they have a chronic illness or when they have to take on that role as caretaker. Insert Joe. Insert Joe. Okay. Then, if that's not bad enough, and I'm saying this as someone who has experience in this area as well, and that's not how you take care of somebody. That's just not, okay? 10 minutes later, he's talking to the cameras one on one and telling them, I am into thinner women. You know, the women I've typically been into are thinner, but that doesn't mean that I'm not attracted to Madison. Physical attraction can grow. I'm so offended for her. First of all, she's beautiful. You outkicked your coverage with Madison. But talking about her, and then he says, I think the most fun part will be later on tonight. Like, you're planning to have sex with her. You're planning to test this connection, and you're not even attracted to her. And you're not being respectful either. She outright asks him if he thought that she was hot, to which he struggles to say yes. And it's just painful to hear her try to guide him to giving compliments. I pray that Madison is never with another man that she has to force to give compliments, because it's just so awful. By the end of their conversation, it ends with something like Joe saying that he was not at peace at first when he met Madison, but he is now, and that's what matters. Again, absolutely not. Cut. Cut. We go to check in with Edmund and KB, and there's a huge bug in the room, and Edmund won't kill it. This would have been a wrap for me. I'm sorry. Thank you for the shoes, but this would have been a wrap. We go on to the couples pool party, because that's really where all of the drama happens. Although I will say that we heard about a conversation on Madison and Joe's date that apparently was off camera, where he made her feel like shit. She was feeling sick about the conversation. And she questions if all he was trying to say in that conversation was that she doesn't align with what his typical type would be, but he's still very attracted to her. And he says yes, although again, she always phrases things for him and presents it so much nicely, so much nicer than he would, because that's not what he would say. At the couple pool party, all the girls talk about sex and all the guys are doing the same. And ultimately, Edmund ends up saying that he's not getting married unless he can hit that. Now, mind you, this is after all of the guys have said that they're having sex, but even when they say that's because she said she wants to wait till marriage, it's obviously something that other people are aware of. Edmund says yes, and then just immediately doesn't care. The other guys are telling him, you should wait. It's 4 weeks. Like, the even other men are telling him that basically you're ignoring her boundaries. You should wait. You're going to be with this person for the rest of your life. Why not respect her boundaries? But all he's interested is having one of the men agree with him and validate how important it is to have sex before he's married. And he ends up having a conversation with Anton. And I hate this entire conversation, because Anton says it would depend on the reason why she didn't want to have sex. If she's a virgin, okay. But if it's a bullshit reason, then he wouldn't be convinced, and he would have some doubts if she was very serious about him. What is a bullshit reason? Like, this is concerning. A woman saying no is a legitimate reason. It's not bullshit, and that's enough. Could that be not feeling well? Could just not be into it. Could be tired. Could be any reason. It's good enough. Like all of this was very concerning. Eventually, Edmonds ends up coming over to where the girls are sitting and helps squirt suntan lotion in their hands, which ultimately devolves into him rubbing sunscreen very sensually onto KB's feet. This was very uncomfortable, even as the viewer. But Madison gets uncomfortable and jokingly, to take some of the weight off of it, asks if she should leave. Edmund says, yeah, go find Joe, and then says that he was joking, although his tone didn't present that at all. To which Calabria comments on the fact that he just ran off one of her friends and he apologizes for doing that, but then continues rubbing in the suntan lotion. He also ends up using this moment as an opportunity, because Annie is sitting there as well, to question her as to why she made this decision for Brendan. He says things that come off kind of rude. KB has to remind him to watch how he says things. And ultimately, he tells the largest lie of all, which is that she would have missed out if she didn't pick Nick, and she ultimately made the right decision. He called him the big dog, and yeah, no. Joe ends up being the asshole at this party. He's super drunk. So is Jordan. Jordan's face looks like a fucking lobster. He's bright red. As I said on my TikTok, even Jordan's sunburn alone would have pissed me off. We would have gotten into an argument, okay? But you're standing there and Joe is just picking on him, salt on your nose, which I don't know if was like to call him out for doing blow or what that comment was, but talking about the color of his nipples, his sunburn, the salt. Shut the fuck up. At some point, Madison walks over and tries to have a conversation about how they're doing physically outside of the pods, and Joe just completely ignores her. It's clear that the only person that Joe is interested in talking to is everybody except for Madison. That's what it's clear. And that he's completely inebriated and also scary when he's inebriated. So anyways, she was trying to talk about how great things are physically between the two of them now that they're together. And Joe just basically says nothing, laughs a little, says, Madison, can you? It's clear that he just didn't want to give her any validation. I think when Madison hit on the fact that he's different on camera, and then the two of them by themselves, I feel like he's a lot more complimentary towards her off camera. And that's gross, because that feels like you're embarrassed of her. Ultimately, Joe ends up eventually going to hang out with Madison until he's not hanging out with Madison, because instead of finding a spot for the two of them to sit and talk, he ends up saying that he's going back to the room and he doesn't want her to come back. Okay? Hours later, we don't know how many hours later, but hours later, it's dark by now. She comes to check on him in the room, and he doesn't remember that he was at the pool party. He doesn't remember that he told her to stay at the pool party. He wonders why she's dressed that way. He doesn't know anything. He knows nothing. Okay? So Madison is freaked the fuck out. And after the fifth time of him asking her, where was she starts crying and she's upset. And at this point, Joe sobers up a little. And I saw some people speculating that he was like putting on an act of how inebriated he was when she came back. No. You know if you've ever seen this experience. He sobered up a little bit, but his drunkenness, this wouldn't go anywhere but a state of rage or something. He's in the bathroom looking at himself, talking to himself in the mirror while Madison's outside on their balcony crying. And basically he's talking about Madison. Like he's like, I just don't understand what her issue is. Okay? The issue is clearly that you're fucked up, right? and it's concerning how you're acting. This was supposed to be a couples meetup day to share your relationship with the other people. You just had time with the guys in the lounge every day, this entire however long you guys were dating. So what's good? Okay. Ultimately, it ends with her being like, okay, I'm coming in hot by giving you a water and taking care of you. And he's like, okay, woman, I feel like I woke up and now I'm here and I don't know what's happened. He's a mess. He's a mess. The fact that they were encouraged to drink so heavily and had so much alcohol out there for them, everybody's an adult and makes their own decision, but the TV show does things for a certain reason. I found this conversation between Edmund and Calabria alarming, a tad triggering, upsetting, and ultimately, for that reason, I'm only going to spend like a moment on it with my thoughts. They end up on the topic of the fact that they are the only people who haven't had sex yet. Edmund is bothered by this, especially once he finds out that KB has had one night stands and that she views sex differently than him. For KB, sex is not some huge intimate thing where you love them and it's kept sacred. Sex can be non-committal. It can be to get your lick off essentially, okay, and then go. And sometimes the quicker that you have sex might mean that you respect that person less or that you don't see any longevity in the relationship, okay? He has an issue with this. He slut shames her and makes it sound like she doesn't care about herself or have respect for herself for letting guys have sex with her that don't respect her or vice versa. He then is upset that he has given her his all and that he doesn't get to have sex with her as her soon to be husband, but other guys have gotten to, and ultimately questions if he's too nice of a guy. Then he says he knows he's too nice of a guy. And what he's saying is, if I had treated you like an asshole, would you have had sex with me like the other guys? And maybe, Edmund, but that would be because she doesn't respect you. And are you here to get laid? Or are you here to find a wife? The fact that this was, if she would have had sex with him, this was a coercive conversation, that there's no other way around it. This felt like a coercive conversation. Anything but yes, I understand to a woman's boundaries on intimacy is disgusting to me. There's no justifying it. As you don't know this woman, you know nothing about her, nor are you entitled to sleep with her because you're paired up with her, because you're in a hotel room with her, because you do nice things for her, because you've spent money on her, because other men have had sex there. You aren't entitled to any of that. This whole conversation just really pissed me off. Him crying and being manipulative. Get the fuck out. To fast forward and find out that she spent the night on the balcony, he would have been sleeping on that balcony. And there's no justification for this conversation. It was wildly inappropriate. And again, the level of alcohol to which everybody consumed is a problem. That was just not appropriate. That was just not appropriate. Whoo! Let me know what your thoughts are. Coming up, no couple, none, should get married. Not a one. If you think there's one, let me know. I think this season should have stayed in the drafts. I don't think there's anything positive, uplifting, or affirming about love, being blind. None of that. I think this is a horrendous season where everybody sucks, pretty much. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. This worked me up quite a bit, but we have the Love Island Games finale this evening, and I will be back tomorrow to recap all of it with you. Bye.